Confirmation bias says that once we see something or believe something, that we will make other things fit that narrative. We'll automatically believe them if we believe it strongly enough. Okay, yeah, I get that. But watch this. Studies show, and they did this with research, if you are introduced with new information and for some reason you believe it's undeniably true, and I present you with 3 pieces of information from a particular source, and you believe that those pieces of information are undeniably true, then you'll automatically believe the 4th one. Now, this is research, cognitive bias, so there's going to be exceptions. You'll automatically believe the 4th thing from them, but the worst part is that it will take 11 iterations of counter facts or counter information for you to start doubting that source. And as long as the source every once in a while throws in some more undeniably true information, you could be locked in forever. It's kind of like that duck in psychology classes that would peck on this button, and when pecking on the button, it would give the duck food, and then if they stopped giving it food, the duck eventually stopped pecking on the button. But if the researchers went random and gave it food sometimes and didn't give it food other times, the duck would click that thing for the rest of its life. So that randomness that gets in there can create that. That's why you can have cults and conspiracy theories, because once they stop believing it, they believe everything else. And it's not that they're being mean or nasty or think, they just literally believe it. It's tied in. All right, now, pre-stimulus. Last week I talked about priming, and then we have beliefs and stories. The other thing I want to add, though, now we're going to look at it because I want to go to a new page and draw it a little bit differently. Over here we have our stimulus response bubble or cycle, right? We have the S, the R, and then the response. We have the cognitive biases in there, and we have the meta programs in there. And so this is a thing. And what's interesting is this thing is on the short end 750 milliseconds, and on the long end, let's call it 3 seconds. So 3,000 milliseconds on the long end. And that's arbitrary. I mean, I'm not a scientist, and we could talk about that. But the reason I put 3 seconds in there is because that gives enough time to assess. But then there's another part out here I would call it 3 minutes, that I would still put as part of this. This whole thing is what I call the stimulus response cycle. This is my version of it. This is access to those powerful present moments that can change your life. There's about 65,000 seconds in your waking day. If you consider that there's sometimes more than one moment in a second, you can see that in a day, accessing the powerful present moment is the gateway to you changing your life. And the powerful present moment is not just that moment, it's the pre-stimulus, during the stimulus response, and then the post-stimulus response. And that post-stimulus response, I use it as 3 minutes, because after 3 minutes, it requires different work. Inside the 3 minutes, I can build this whole thing into a habit. This whole thing can be habitual. So when I talk about the automaticity of the subconscious, I'm talking about creating a stimulus response cycle that serves you, and that stimulus response cycle will be a few minutes. In the beginning, it could be a lot more. The conditioning is way out here, right? That's where it really starts. We start with the condition. And this condition is where we are. Now, a person could be energized, they could be defeated, they could be stressed out, right? They could be on edge. There's all sorts of different adjectives for their condition. They could be rigid, they could be chaotic. But this has a lot to do with what happens over here, because if you're out of sorts over here, it's going to be harder to manage this. So we've got to come upstream and manage these things effectively. And then we have, this is where I started picking up last week, we have priming. We also have beliefs, and we have stories.